Welcome to the Intentional Household podcast. Are you constantly exhausted, running from task to task, and feel like you have no time to breathe? If you feel like you are just surviving, then this podcast episode is for you. Today, we're going to talk about why survival mode is not living, it's unsustainable, what is draining your energy, and how you can delegate out those tasks to better support you so you can start living. Alex, I think we often use the term survival mode when dealing with our kids since they were born. It seems like we're constantly in survival mode, especially at nighttime. I don't know if you can relate to that, but I think many parents from the moment they bring their baby home until, who knows, maybe even when their child leaves for university, they feel like they're in survival mode. Do you ever feel like you're in survival mode?
Yes and no. So what I want to clarify is that, I don't really think that we feel that we are in forever survival mode. Okay. And that's where it's very important for you to take time for yourself to recharge your batteries. Take a little time each day to recharge your batteries, because you are going to have to do things that will take a lot of energy, but you want to break up those times. I can say, thinking back of, yes, there was extended periods of survival mode time, but that's when we had a newborn and other toddlers to take care of. Those first 6 weeks of the newborn, that's definitely a survival mode time. But thinking back to then and where we are now, we've come so much farther. What's a period that you find you're in survival mode?
Well, if I look back, I think many of us will agree that during the pandemic, we were in survival mode. That's when we had a 7-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old. And every day was waking up without support, managing the kids, doing the same thing, but not going to a park, but somehow entertaining them, and doing that on repeat day after day after day. And we are now out of the pandemic and we've been able to hire people to support us. But I think a lot of people are still in that mode where they're waking up, they have a never-ending to-do list that they can't keep up with. They're working, they're managing their kids, the house is in shambles, and then they wake up, they go to sleep and wake up, and it continues. So for me, it was the pandemic. But for others, it continues into school age, high school years. Let's talk about what it means to be in survival mode. So it's feeling exhausted. It's feeling disconnected from the joys of life, from having a purpose. It's just dealing with the tasks for now or not being able to get on top of the future. It's living in a reactive kind of state.
Well, I think the consequences of that are, so that may be how you feel on the inside. And on the outside, how that comes out, you're shorter with your children. You may be yelling at your children. And then you end up in the cycle. Now you feel guilty about yelling at your children. So that adds on to your the list of things that are bringing you and dragging you down. You need to fill your cup back up again. That's the key thing. How do you get out of this rut? So again, I'm going to use a strategic coach example, because a lot of these things you can take and you can apply these to your personal life as well. Strategic Coach is a coaching program for entrepreneurs. But there's something they call the gap in the gain. And the idea of the gap is just exactly what you described. That feeling of doubt, something's never going to end. How am I going to get out of this? Am I stuck in this forever? That's the gap area. And we can all fall into that. But the idea is you want to minimize your time in that area. And something that you said, like talking about being going over that survival mode, but the never-ending to-do list, the feeling you're not preparing yourself for the future. And we've talked about it before. A lot of that is expectations. What set different expectations. So we talked about in a previous episode where I was trying to spend one-on-one time with the kids, and I set it up too frequently, and I failed immediately because I was trying to do one-on-one time with the kids every week, and and having these impactful and memorable moments every week, and it wasn't something that I could do. And we changed the expectations, and now we have a successful schedule with that. So it's just going through and minimizing your time in that gap, that dark period where you're like, oh, no, I'm going to be stuck here forever. Well, here's the great thing. You're only stuck there because you're choosing to be stuck there. Let's get you out of there. You can absolutely do that. We just have to, okay, you have a never-ending to-do list? Well, let's remove things from your to-do list. You feel that you're not setting things up for the future. Well, that means you've created expectations you can't meet. So let's change the expectations so that you can meet them. So you start working through things to get you back into that gain area where you're not feeling in survival mode. You're feeling like you're moving forward.
I want to get into the sustainability of survival mode because I think that a lot of parents think that it's the norm to be living in survival mode when you have young kids who are school aged. And is that realistic? Because if you're talking about survival mode and living in that mode for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, what's the impact that that's going to have on you, your health, your relationships? So it truly is not sustainable.
No, and I love that you bring that up. As we age, which we do, our body adjusts to stresses differently. So if you're running in survival mode, then you're running in a high stress environment, and your body is going to start letting you know. And a lot of people don't share these things. And I know I shared in a previous episode that one of the things that stress brings out is I get hemorrhoids. So I know I'm stressed out if I have hemorrhoids. But another area that it brings out in me is it really impacts my gut. And I'll get gas buildup. And it's put me in the hospital before because I didn't even know what it was. This is when I was running on the highest stress level. And I felt like I was vomiting burps. That's what it was. And why I share this is because if you're noticing your body reacting in a way and you're like, well, what's wrong with me? It's probably your body telling you, hey, you're in survival mode right now. And yeah, you can do it for a period of time, but this isn't sustainable. So we're starting to press the warning buttons going, hey, you need to change. Hey, you need to change. You need to take action on this stuff now because you can't sustain this.
Not at all. I think it can make us anxious individuals. I think that I know for me, I can really feel it in my neck and shoulders. It can also lead to sleep issues.
And that's the physical side. So that's the physical. Now let's talk about relationships. Well, let's divorce. Like why do people get divorced? Well, there's friction, there's stress. So if you're two parties, two spouses living both in survival mode for an extended period, do you think that you guys are getting along? Well, you probably have short fuses. You're probably arguing with each other. And it's because you have no room for error, and you've used up all your patience. And now that's not only is there going to be physical consequences, which are then going to also impact your ability to do things, which will impact your relationship because you have two stressed out people and now you have less ability to do things. And then what happens? Well, then divorce happens.
If we're talking about how it can impact your relationship, it also can impact the relationship that you have with your kids, because if you are in survival mode, individuals can have a short temper, short fuse, and really take it out on their kids. And that's going to impact the bond and the trust that they have in you. So there are many impacts, or rather, there are many effects that the survival mode can have in areas of your life. So, doing something about it now so that you can nip it in the bud and really enjoy life.
Why is it nip it in the bud, anyways? I'd like to know that. Why is it nip in? Because I know it's an expression, but I would always say nip it in the bud.
Well, most people did. Most people do, I think, or a lot of people do. Anyway, this is not going to be part of the podcast.
Oh, I think it should be. I'd like to know a poll on IG. Please DM us why it's nip it in the bud and not nip it in the bud.
That's a simple Google.
Well,
yeah.
I would like to know.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a gardening reference. That would make sense then.
So let's talk about strategies to get out of survival mode so that people can start living their lives.
The first thing is you got to recognize you're in survival mode.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Recognize you're in survival mode and sit down with your spouse. And again, it's just start listing out all the things that are causing the stresses. And then once you do that, okay, here I'm in survival mode. So you and this is important. This is, think of this as an addiction. Let's think of this as an addiction. Let's think it could be an alcohol addiction, could be a drug addiction, you could be a workaholic. The first and most important thing, admitting that there's a problem. Because once you've admitted there's a problem, this is great. This is the first step. So admit there's a problem, going, hey, you know what? We can't keep on living like this. Something has to change. Or, as we described, there'll be physical ailments. There could be divorce. These things lead to death. Like all these things. Like again, I'm going back to strategic coach, and they have something called an impact filter. We're looking for the worst result. What's the worst result that can happen if we keep on living this life? So you look at the worst result, and you're like, wow, I don't want that. Okay, well, if I don't want that, what's the best result if we make change? Oh, that best result looks fantastic. So let's look at the best result. Okay, that's the best result. We're going to have a much more fulfilling life, being engaged with our children, present with our children, have a deeper connection with our spouse. Okay, that's the life that I want. Okay, so now we've given a why. We have a why. We've admitted we have a problem. Okay, so now we're listing out all the things that we need to take action on to change us from a survival mode into a thriving mode. Okay, so we lifted all the actions out. And then beside all the things that needs to change, then you start, okay, what's the first step that needs to be taken? And then start chipping them off the list. Because as you do that, you're starting to relieve the stress slowly. None of this stuff is going to happen overnight. But as long as you start mapping out a plan on how to get there and you have buy-in from both sides, you can make a transformational change in 6 months. So Laura said, easy, how do you start this process? Okay, well, you know what? Piece of paper, a pen, and some one-on-one time away from the children, just with your spouse. Just create like a little hour block in a comfortable setting. Got to be in a comfortable setting, right? With no distractions.
People are feeling open-minded.
Yeah.
Open to discussion.
Yeah. Not
going to be defensive.
Key thing. Yes. Key thing is you have to go with an open mind. So this actually goes, and we've talked about this so many times. Whatever you need to do to ground yourself, to bring you back to ground zero. So it's all about taking care of yourself. Bring your spouse in, take care of your spouse, then take care of your family. Mm-hmm. So the first start is get yourself into a clear space, book that one-on-one time, but don't rush into that one-on-one time. Let's say you're at work and you have a meeting from work and then you go rush right into this meeting. Well, that meeting's the meeting with your spouse to talk about how to remove things is going to be a failure because you're going to be so wound up from something else. You need to have a little bit of buffer space in there to clear your mind. Go for maybe a walk, like a 15, 30-minute walk before, this kind of thing. And then sit down with each other, relax, and start listing out the things that you need to change, and then the next actions that need to be taken. And remember, as we said, it takes a village. You can go out and find people to help you, because remember, if you're in survival mode and there's only two of you and you're at your wit's end with everything, you probably got to bring some outside help in. that's okay. So if there's a number of things that you're stressing about and you're like, I can't figure out how we're gonna do this, there's just not enough time in the week. Well, go get some more time by bringing in someone to help you with those things, and that's going to free up your own time to do things that you want to do.
What's some low-hanging fruit here in terms of tasks that can be outsourced that don't require hiring even part-time or full-time support? So just kind of as needed support.
Well, I think first off, if we go, we can talk about a reorganization of duties, right? We've talked about it before, where there are certain things that drain you as an individual that may not drain the other individual. So, when I know that you do not like emptying the dishwasher, and this is something small, low hanging fruit. And I'm like, emptying the dishwasher, no big deal for me. I just empty the dishwasher as I'm making breakfast for everyone. And that just happened through communication, but that's something that you really don't like doing. So that's low hanging fruit, something small, but it's taking a little stress point off of your day. So the very first thing you can do is maybe a reorganization of duties where someone may be more comfortable doing something that they had no idea that the other person dreaded and didn't like doing.
So truly, if we're going to back up and start from the beginning, the first step is creating an entire list of, it could either be all of the activities or all of the tasks that you and your partner are responsible for in the household. Or probably if you are in survival mode and really fed up and overwhelmed, then maybe you're just going to start with the list of items that are your biggest pain points. And it's probably going to be really easy to jot those down on a piece of paper very quickly. I'm sure they will just flow out. So then it's looking at the list, reviewing them together. And it's not about me transferring my draining task to you, which may also be a draining task to you, right? It's about us reviewing the list together and you looking at the tasks and being like, well, Laura truly despises doing that task, but I don't mind it at all. So that's an easy one. We don't need to outsource that because I'm more than happy to unload the dishwasher. But then if there are items on there, such as I'm thinking repairs, let's say mowing the lawn, shoveling the driveway, walking the dogs, those could be ones where cleaning the house. So those can be tasks where you can outsource those by just using a handyman or a repairman, getting a dog walker, a cleaning lady, someone to shovel.
And I think it goes back, it's also the questions you ask, right? So, and we've talked about this before, so let's talk about let's say someone helping out with the household cleaning, for example. Let's position the question in a different way. Let's go, we're stressed out, we're drained. What if I gave you 10 hours a week back? And you're like, wow, if I had 10 hours back, that would really help me. Okay. So we have our list. We need to get 10 hours back. How are we going to get you 10 hours back? Okay. Well, here's a task that you've identified as draining, and I've identified as draining. Okay. Let's outsource that. Let's go to that next level that we can outsource that and get that done. And now that's bought back 10 hours a week. Like, it's all about how you frame the question and how you're looking at us together. So let's look at it now. Let's change the question and go like, well, we're stressed. We're stressed out. We're in survival mode. Okay. Would our lives be better if we get 10 hours a week back, 20 hours a week back? Look at that. And then look at your list of draining things, associate an hour, how many hours that takes of your week. And then the satisfaction of then crossing that out, that pen and paper. And now we're crossing that out and then taking those hours that were from that task and putting it over here into new available hours for us to do things. It's, I hate using the terminology, but it's the mindset change of thinking of it that way. Hey, we're stressed, we're in survival, so we need more hours. How do we get more hours? Well, we got to remove things. So let's associate it in how many hours we spend doing this draining task and then remove that. Because again, it's not even just the time to do the task, it's all the dread time that you have before and after as well.
And having it done correctly, which, what if someone has a family member who they're like, okay, you're in survival mode. I see you're clearly drained. You guys are talking about starting to outsource some tasks. Hey, I'm available. I can help you. Maybe it's, a mother or a mother-in-law or a friend. The question is, how willing are you to accept their help if they're, well, let's just say you need someone to occupy your kids after school. And our son in particular has a lot of energy. So if I wrote down the criteria, I need someone to watch our kids after school, take them outdoors so that they can expend their energy, come home, and it's been spent outside. And what if you have that friend or family member who says, hey, I can help. I'll pick them up after school. And you agree, okay, sure. You communicate the expectations and then they pick them up and they bring them home and they're watching TV. The question is, how helpful? And like, to what extent do you accept that help from family members if they aren't actually meeting your needs?
Well, what you have to look at is what's the primary issue? So let's go back to that piece of paper, the draining piece of paper. And you're like, okay, well, I have the kids and I have to take the children to the park, and I find it really exhausting because they want me to run around and play monster with them. And I just don't have my time in the day to do that. So if someone offers the help, the primary problem isn't hey, I need someone from this time to this time. I need someone to go run around with my kids from this time to this time. So it's clearly defining the task that needs to be completed. That's the key thing. So when you're writing out this list, clearly define what the draining task is. Because once you clearly define it, then you can set expectations to someone that's going to help you with that. So going to get back to this example, if someone's helping out by just being a body at your household to make sure that your kids stay alive, well, that didn't solve the primary problem. Primary problem was you need someone to run around with your kids to physically drain them of energy, and then also they're full of, because they want to run around. They want to be they want to be satisfied, and they come home and they're satisfied. So that then when you go into the next stage of that, dinner and bedtime, they're not acting out because they didn't get that time where they needed to run around and expend their energy and everything like that. So it's clear, like pen and paper, writing things down, but just clearly describing what needs to be done at that time. And again, it goes to that word expectations.
Yeah. And really, if we're going to go back to treating your household like it's an organization, in an organization, if you were going to outsource something or if you're going to hire someone for the team, you would be writing down the expectations and communicating it to the individual who you're hiring.
And I want to double down on that because I was with a friend recently. He's a C-level individual, known him since university. And I said, hey, wow, you know what? I'm sure you're really good at your job because, you would have no issue firing people. And he's actually, I don't have to fire a lot of people. He's like, whenever there is a failure in the company from an individual, I've known beforehand. And the issue generally is I've put them in the wrong seat and I didn't set them up for success. I set them up for failure because they weren't equipped to handle the task at hand. So there wasn't an issue with the individual. It was an issue with the environment the individual was put in. So he's like, it's rare that I have to fire someone. It's usually a mismatch of a situation, and I have to move the person away from that situation and put the right person in. So again, as you said, thinking of running your household like an organization, you got to put the right people in the right seats. If you put the wrong person, so let's go back to that.
Yeah,
Hey,
this is interesting.
I need someone to run around the park with my kids,
and pretending that this is a family member.
Yeah. So let's put our business hat on. Just how you described, we want to set a person up for success. So putting them in the right seat. Well, let's go. Hey, you have a family. Let's say you have elderly family members. You had children later in life. So your mother lives close by, but she's in her 80s. Because I just want to just put something concrete there. So you have a mother that's in 80s going, hey, no problem. I can help you I can get the kids after school. I can be that body that watches them. But they just don't physically now have the ability to run around with them for an hour and a half and chase them around the park due to the age that they're at right now, at in their 80s. They just can't help the kids expend their energy. So it could end up being a failure because it's not solving what you need, which is, again, the specific example, someone running around the park with their kids. So you want to make sure you're putting, just like you're running a business, you're putting the right person in the right seat. That's the way you got to look at it.
So it really starts with writing down the expectations, communicating the expectations, even if it's to a family member, and they can decide whether they want to take on that role or not. And if not, then there may be another role for them within the household where they can provide you support and meet your expectations in that role.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's again, when that so much power with the pen and paper and setting expectations, and then again borrowing from the strategic coach and the impact filter, the success criteria, right? Like that's setting the expectations, your success criteria. It's okay. In the ideal world, okay, worst case scenario, where are we at? Best case scenario, and here's the criteria that are going to make this a successful endeavor. So again, going back to the example of running around with the kids after school, it's running around with the kids after school. Do you have do they have the ability to run around with the kids after school and play Monster with them? It's going to be one of the success criteria, right? And the person's going to want to have to do that as well. Because again, for the example, we were at the park last night and we had lots of kids that wanted to play Monster with. So our kids, again, we wanted to play Monster with our kids. We had our 3 kids in the park, and we probably had another 7 kids ask if they can play Monster with us, which we said yes to. But none of the other parents were playing Monster with their kids. It was just us playing Monster with the kids. So the key thing is the person and no guilt to them. Sometimes you don't want to play Monster, and you're like, hey, it's great that these parents over there can play Monster with my kids. I'm not looking down on them for not playing Monster with their kids, because sometimes I don't want to play Monster with my kids either. But you want to make sure the person you put in the role is going to want to play Monster with their kids if you're bringing them in to help.
Yeah, family member or hired help.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Treat.
You don't want them sitting on the park bench on their phone.
No.
That's not going to do it either.
No. So Alex, I think a lot of this really comes down to having a mindset shift and really giving yourself permission to prioritize yourself and to just outsource some of these items that drain your energy.
Okay, so going into, again, let's going back and let's continue highlighting the example, and I'll continue to highlight a Monster. So we're at the park, and I'm running around with the kids. I'm playing Monster. Laura, you're running around the kids playing Monster. We have a bunch of other kids that are coming in. There's other parents that aren't playing Monster. But why could we play Monster? It's because in my head, I'm like, you know what? I have X amount of time with my kids at this moment. I'm going to make sure I'm present with them, and I'm going to play Monster with my kids. And why did I have the energy and the ability to do that? Is because I participate in self-care. I've taken care of myself earlier in the day, so I have the energy, the mental capacity, and the ability to go, hey, I'm going to be present in this moment and play with the kids. But if you're not practicing self-care, and I've been there, you're like, oh my God, I don't have the energy to run around and chase the kids. And also the other energy of adding other kids on. I did have the energy last night because I am taking care of myself. So, and I don't have guilt in regards to the time I spend taking care of myself, because I know that I'm going to give it back to my spouse and to my family later on. And I'm going to be a better person when I do that, focusing on the quality time when I'm with them. And even on Fridays, when we leave our kids, our kids are like, Mama, don't leave, Dada, don't leave. I'm like, we say to them, we're leaving right now to go spend time with each other or time with ourselves so we can be better parents when we come back. And that's the mindset that we have. So Laura, why don't you talk about a little more about how people shouldn't have guilt about self-care?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to self-care, a lot of people do struggle because if you have, let's just say, a baby or a young one, or you are watching them during the day and you want to do an activity for an hour, some moms do feel that they have that responsibility to be with their kid all day. And so it's selfish putting their child in the care of someone else for an hour to take care of themselves. But the reality is that self-care isn't selfish, because it is taking care of your own needs, making sure that you are recharged and you are happy and fulfilling your own purpose. Because if we, moms in particular, aren't our best selves, if we aren't happy, then it does affect the rest of the family. The other thing is understanding that quality, like you were saying, is more important than quantity.
Absolutely. Like, if you think of it, do you want to half-ass your time with your kids and they just have a marginal experience with you? Or let's reduce the amount of time you spend with your kids, and then the time they spend with you is high quality. Like that's what you want to strive for.
And I think one other last thing I want to point out is that a lot of parents are looking for perfectionism. They want things done in a particular or their way. If you're thinking about making a bed, I know that some people don't want to bring in help because they think, well, the person who I hire isn't going to make the bed the way I make the bed. They aren't going to do the laundry or fold the laundry the way I do. But the reality is, if you're looking at big picture, doesn't matter.
Well, I'll make another business reference.
Okay.
You know, a lot of businesses can get hung up, and projects can get hung up, and people can relate to this. Things can get hung up because they're waiting for perfection before they go to launch with something. But if you do that, nothing's ever going to get launched. So you take the 80% rule, get something to 80%, then launch it, and you can adjust after the launch. Apply the same thing at home. Just get things to an 80% level. Because if you're focusing on perfection, then nothing is going to get done, or there's going to be a stress in the household for that. As saying, oh well, using the bed example, they're not going to make the beds the way I want the beds to be made. Hey, but the bed's made. Like, it's just bring it to an 80% level. If you're shooting for perfection, you're just adding friction and stress, and things won't get done. And we're all guilty of it. And I'll go back to the example of where I tried to create quality time too frequently with the kids. And in that one-on-one moments, it just wasn't going to happen because I couldn't do within the frequency that I wanted. And then it didn't happen. But then when we adjusted the schedule and spread it out a little more, I was able to make it happen. So just make things happen is what you want to do. And that's the key thing. Don't shoot for perfection, because when your kids are grown up and out of the house, do you want them saying, wow, I really wish we did that? Or going, wow, we did that. And remember when that happened? That was pretty funny. Wasn't expecting that to happen. It's part of the journey. Mistakes are part of the journey. That's what makes a good story. You generally don't tell a good story about how perfect something was. A good story usually comes from an embarrassing situation or something that went wrong. Those are the stories that are going to be told around the table when everyone's grown up. Can't think of any perfection stories we tell. The only stories I tell are the funny ones.
So before we wrap this up, let's just go over some key takeaways that listeners can implement if they are in survival mode. So the first thing is recognizing if you're in survival mode. Secondly, getting together with your partner in a low stress environment, carving out the time so that you can create a list of your pain points, review them together, and see what is some low hanging fruit that you can easily outsource to remove from your plate. If there's something bigger, consider hiring more support who can help with that. Setting the expectations, writing it down on paper and communicating it to the individual who is going to support you, whether it is a family member or hire support. Again, treating your household like it's an organization, giving yourself permission to slow down, put in some time to finding time for self-care for yourself, recognizing that it's not selfish and that you do need to put yourself first. One actionable step I would ask to listeners is to ask yourself, what is one small step you could do today to regain your energy? Leave us a comment or send me a DM. Thank you for listening to the Intentional Household podcast. We will see you next time.